you are. Men don't contact unless something shifts in the psychological equation. And that shift never begins with begging, over-explaining, double-texting, you are, or trying to prove your worth. It begins the moment you stop trying to control the outcome and start controlling yourself. Attraction is not built on need, you are. It is built on tension, respect, and perceived value. When a man feels certain he has you emotionally secured without effort, the chase ends, you are. The mind does not pursue what it already owns. It pursues what it might lose. That is not cruelty. That is human nature. And if you don't understand that, you are. You will keep exhausting yourself trying to revive attention that only returns when you reclaim your power. Here is the truth most people avoid when you overextend. You reduce your leverage. When you constantly initiate, constantly reassure, constantly accommodate, you communicate something beneath your words. You communicate fear of loss. And fear is not attractive. Strength is attractive. Stability is attractive. You are. A life that does not revolve around someone's inconsistent behavior is attractive. Men contact again when they sense that your world has not collapsed in their absence. You are. They contact when they feel the space you've created. They contact when the easy access is gone and the emotional comfort they took for granted is no longer guaranteed. You are. Understand this deeply. Attention is currency. If you give it endlessly without standards, it loses value. If you withdraw it with dignity, it regains power. You are. This is not manipulation, it is boundaries, and boundaries are a signal of self-respect. When a man realizes that your energy is no longer automatically available, he recalibrates. The human brain is wired to respond to contrast. Presence feels stronger after absence. Certainty feels urgent after doubt. You are. If he senses that you are moving forward, improving, focused, emotionally steady without chasing him, something triggers. Curiosity returns. Respect increases. You are. And respect is the gateway to pursuit. But this only works if the shift is real. You cannot pretend to detach while secretly obsessing. You are. You cannot perform indifference while monitoring every notification. Strength must be internal before it becomes visible externally. That means building a life so full, you are. So purposeful, so demanding of your attention that you are no longer waiting. Waiting is weak energy. Moving is powerful energy. When your schedule is structured, you are. When your body is disciplined, when your goals are clear, you radiate something different. You radiate non-neediness. And non-neediness creates desire. You are. Men don't contact because you ask them to. They contact when they feel something slipping. They contact when admiration resurfaces. You are. They contact when they recognize that your value exceeds their access. That recognition cannot be argued into existence. It must be experienced. You are. If he believes you will always be there regardless of effort, effort disappears. If he senses he must rise to keep you, effort returns. This is not about games. You are. It is about standards. Standards filter behavior. Standards command respect. And here is the deeper layer. People pursue what challenges their growth. You are. If you shrink yourself to be easier, you remove the challenge. If you tolerate inconsistency, you train him to be inconsistent. If you reward minimal effort, you will receive minimal effort. But if you reward strength with access and withdraw from weakness without drama, you reshape the dynamic. You are. Calm withdrawal is more powerful than emotional confrontation. Silence backed by self-development is louder than arguments backed by insecurity. You are. Do not misunderstand this. The goal is not to make someone chase you. The goal is to become someone who does not chase. When that transformation happens, you are. Everything changes. You stop reacting. You start choosing. You stop fearing silence. You start valuing peace. And paradoxically, that is when messages arrive. You are. Because confidence alters perception. A grounded person is magnetic and an anxious person repels. So if you want him to contact, stop focusing on him contacting. You are. Focus on becoming formidable. Train your mind, strengthen your body, elevate your standards, build routines that demand discipline, speak less, observe more. You are. Invest in friendships, ambitions, skills. When your identity expands beyond the relationship, your emotional leverage increases automatically. You are. And when he senses that your attention is no longer guaranteed, that you are progressing with or without him, the psychological equation shifts. You are. Men don't contact unless something happens first. And that something is your transformation. Not a tactic, not a strategy, a transformation. You are. The moment you no longer need the message is the moment you are powerful enough to receive it without losing yourself. And if it never comes, you are. Then your strength still remains, because the real victory was never getting him to reach out. The real victory was reclaiming control over your energy, your focus, you are, and your direction. Stand up internally, withdraw with dignity, improve relentlessly. Let silence test character, let absence reveal truth. And remember this, you are. The one who is willing to walk away from what disrespects them holds the power. Not because they are cold, but because they are disciplined, you are. And discipline is the highest form of self-respect. Men pull away when emotional certainty is gone. Certainty returns only when value and challenge are restored. You are. That is the law most people refuse to accept because it demands responsibility instead of blame. When a man senses that the emotional dynamic has become predictable, you are. When he feels that nothing is required of him to maintain connection, when admiration turns into availability and mystery turns into management, you are. Something inside him disengages. Not because he is evil, not because he never cared, but because the tension that fuels pursuit has dissolved. And without tension, you are. There is no drive. Without challenge, there is no growth. Without the possibility of loss, there is no urgency. Emotional certainty sounds beautiful, you are. But excessive certainty kills attraction. When someone believes they have secured you completely, your time, your attention, your loyalty, you are. Without continuing to earn it, complacency replaces effort. The human psyche is wired to value what requires investment. If there is no risk, there is no reward, you are. If there is no edge, there is no excitement. When you make it clear through constant reassurance and overextension that you will remain regardless of inconsistency, you are. You remove the very friction that sustains desire. Certainty returns only when value and challenge are restored, and value is not loud. It is not dramatic. You are. It is not emotional pleading. Value is composure. It is standards. It is a life that does not revolve around someone else's mood swings. You are. When you are grounded in your own purpose, when your days are structured around growth, discipline, and self-respect, you radiate something different. You are. You communicate without speaking that your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. And challenge is not manipulation. It is not playing games. You are. It is simply refusing to collapse your world to accommodate someone who has stopped investing. Men pull away when they feel they have conquered the terrain. You are. They re-engage when the terrain evolves. If you become predictable in your reactions, predictable in your availability, predictable in your tolerance, you are. You remove the complexity that stimulates curiosity. Curiosity is the engine of connection. When curiosity dies, effort fades. But when you reclaim your independence, you are. Emotionally and practically, you reintroduce uncertainty. And uncertainty, when paired with dignity, creates renewed attention. This does not mean becoming cold. You are. It means becoming centered. There is a difference. Coldness is reaction. Centeredness is strength. You are. When he senses that your happiness is not contingent on his validation, when he sees that you are progressing regardless of his involvement, a recalibration occurs. You are. The brain responds to contrast. If he felt you slipping into over-availability before, and now he senses distance backed by self-respect, his perception shifts. You are. The comfort he once took for granted becomes something he must work to maintain. You must understand this clearly. Challenge is not arguing. It is not testing. You are. It is not threatening to leave. Challenge is standards enforced calmly. It is the quiet refusal to reward minimal effort. You are. It is the discipline to step back when effort declines. It is the strength to let silence reveal character. When you stop chasing clarity and start embodying it, you are. The dynamic changes because now interaction with you requires presence. It requires intention. It requires growth. And here is the deeper truth. You are. People invest where they feel they must rise. If being with you demands emotional maturity, consistency, and strength, you are. Then only a man willing to cultivate those traits will remain engaged. But if being with you demands nothing but occasional attention, that is all you will receive. You are. Value is established through what you tolerate and what you withdraw from. Every time you accept less than you deserve, you train someone to give less. You are. Every time you calmly remove yourself from diminished effort, you signal that access to you has conditions. You are. When emotional certainty disappears because he feels insecure about where he stands, that is one scenario. But far more often, you are. Men pull away because they feel too certain, too safe, too comfortable, and comfort without growth breeds stagnation. So restore the edge, not by drama, by elevation. You are. Improve your habits, strengthen your routines, deepen your social world, speak with intention, move with purpose. When your life expands, his perception of you expands. You are. Certainty returns when he feels he could lose something rare, and rarity is not about looks or status, it is about character. You are. It is about a woman who does not negotiate her self-respect. It is about someone who values her time, who is not easily shaken, who does not beg for reassurance. You are. Strength attracts because strength signals stability, and stability is magnetic. If he pulls away, resist the impulse to chase. That impulse is fear speaking. You are. Replace it with discipline. Redirect your focus toward growth. Let space do its work. If he values you, he will feel the shift. If he does not, you are. Then the space protects you from investing further in someone unwilling to meet you at your level. Either outcome is clarity. You are. Men pull away when emotional certainty is gone, but the deeper reality is this: when you restore your own certainty, you are. When you become anchored in your standards and your direction, you no longer fear the pullback, and that internal stability is what restores attraction. You are. Because the most powerful position you can occupy is not waiting to be chosen. It is choosing yourself first every single time. You are. Respect and admiration drive pursuit more than attention and availability. That is the foundation, not charm, not constant texting, not over giving. You are. Respect is the engine. Admiration is the fuel, and without them, pursuit collapses into convenience. When someone admires you, they move toward you. You are. When someone merely has access to you, they relax, and when they relax too much, effort disappears. This is not about manipulation. You are. It is about understanding human psychology at its core. Attention is common. Availability is everywhere. Anyone can respond quickly. You are. Anyone can rearrange their schedule. Anyone can overextend themselves to prove interest. But admiration cannot be manufactured through effort alone. You are. It is earned through character, through discipline, through standards that are visible in action, not just spoken in conversation. When a man respects you, you are. He measures himself against you. When he admires you, he rises to meet you. But when he simply has you, he settles. You are. Respect begins with how you carry yourself when no one is watching. It is built in the decisions you make daily, how you treat your time, your body, your commitments. You are. If your life lacks structure, if your emotions are reactive, if your boundaries dissolve under pressure, admiration fades. Because admiration requires strength. You are. And strength is calm, consistent, and self-directed. The moment you trade strength for approval, you lose the very thing that creates attraction. You are. Availability without standards communicates fear. It signals that you are more concerned with being kept than being valued. You are. And that subtle message shifts the dynamic instantly. When someone feels they do not have to earn your presence, they unconsciously downgrade its worth. You are. The human mind values what requires investment. It protects what demands effort. It pursues what feels slightly out of reach, not unreachable, but not guaranteed. You are. When you are endlessly accessible, you remove the tension that fuels pursuit. Admiration grows when you have a mission beyond the relationship. You are. When your identity is not consumed by romantic validation. When your schedule is full because you are building something meaningful. You are. A person with direction is magnetic, not because they ignore others, but because their energy is not desperate. It is grounded. You are, and grounded energy commands respect without demanding it. When he sees that you are progressing with or without him, his perception shifts. You are. He no longer sees someone waiting. He sees someone advancing. Respect also comes from emotional stability. If every small shift in communication unsettles you, you are. If every delayed message triggers anxiety, if your mood is controlled by his behavior, admiration weakens. Strength is attractive because it signals security. You are, and security is rare. A woman who can maintain composure under uncertainty communicates power, not loud power, quiet power. And quiet power is far more compelling. You are. Do not confuse kindness with over-availability. Kindness is strength expressed gently. Over-availability is insecurity expressed subtly. There is a difference. You are. You can be warm without being easily accessed. You can be open without being endlessly accommodating. When you protect your time and energy, you elevate their value. You are. When you give them freely without discernment, you dilute them. Men pursue what they respect because respect activates competition within them. You are. It triggers the desire to prove capability. But there is nothing to prove when standards are low. There is no challenge when everything is accepted. You are. And challenge is not conflict. It is expectation. Calm, unwavering expectation. If he cancels plans repeatedly and you tolerate it without consequence, you are. Admiration erodes. If you respond to inconsistency with distance instead of drama, admiration strengthens. Because now your behavior reflects self-worth. You are. Attention seeks reassurance. Admiration seeks alignment. If you focus on gaining attention, you will constantly perform. If you focus on building admiration, you are. You will constantly improve. Improvement is sustainable. Performance is exhausting. And exhaustion breeds resentment. You are. The goal is not to keep someone interested through effort alone. The goal is to become someone whose character sustains interest naturally. You are. When respect and admiration are present, pursuit feels voluntary, it feels inspired, it feels driven by desire rather than obligation. You are. But when someone is merely accustomed to your presence, effort becomes minimal, predictable, comfortable, and comfort without reverence leads to stagnation. You are. So build yourself in ways that command silent respect. Speak clearly, move intentionally. Do not overshare to secure closeness. Let your actions reveal depth gradually. You are. Maintain friendships, maintain fitness. These are not superficial traits, they are signals of discipline. You are, and discipline is attractive because it reflects control. Control over impulses, control over emotions, control over direction. If you want pursuit, you are. Cultivate admiration. If you want consistency, maintain standards. If you want effort, stop rewarding complacency. Attention can be gained by anyone. You are. Availability can be offered by anyone. But respect must be earned and maintained. And when someone truly respects you, they protect the connection. They invest in it. You are. They rise for it. Understand this clearly. You do not secure love by being endlessly accessible. You secure it by being deeply admirable. You are. And admiration is born from self-respect. The more you respect your own time, energy, and standards, the more others will feel compelled to do the same. You are. Because in the end, pursuit is not driven by how much you give. It is driven by how much you are worth rising for. Scarcity creates gravity. You are. Over. Availability kills tension. That is not a game. That is a psychological law. What is constantly present becomes invisible. What is limited becomes valuable. You are. And in relationships, the moment your presence feels guaranteed regardless of behavior, the dynamic shifts from pursuit to comfort, from effort to assumption. You are. From excitement to maintenance. Gravity is created by weight, and weight in human connection is created by standards, boundaries. You are. And the awareness that access is earned, not automatic. When you are always available, always responding instantly, always adjusting your schedule, you are. Always initiating conversations, you remove the space where anticipation grows. Anticipation is the birthplace of desire. Without it, interaction becomes routine. You are. Routine may feel safe, but it does not inspire pursuit. It does not awaken urgency. It does not demand growth. Scarcity, however, introduces awareness. You are. It forces someone to recognize your absence. It compels them to value your presence because it is not endlessly accessible. You are. This does not mean disappearing to manipulate. It means having a life structured enough that you are not waiting. Scarcity rooted in insecurity feels like withdrawal. You are. Scarcity rooted in purpose feels like strength. There is a difference. When your time is genuinely invested in meaningful work, disciplined habits, strong friendships, you are, and personal growth, you are naturally less available. And that natural limitation creates gravity. People lean toward what feels substantial. You are. They pursue what feels anchored. Over availability communicates something subtle but powerful. You are my priority. You are. Even when I am not yours. That imbalance erodes tension immediately. Tension is not conflict. It is polarity. You are. It is the space between two independent individuals choosing each other. When independence disappears, tension collapses. And when tension collapses, you are. Attraction weakens. Because attraction thrives on the recognition that the other person has options, direction, and standards beyond the relationship. You are. Scarcity creates gravity because it introduces consequence. If your energy is limited, it must be valued. If your time is structured, it must be scheduled. You are. If your attention is focused, it must be earned. The human mind is wired to respect what requires effort. You are. If someone knows they can reach you at any moment with minimal investment, their motivation declines, not out of malice, but because effort follows necessity. You are. Remove necessity and you remove effort. You must understand this deeply. Being less available is not about punishment. It is about proportion. You are. Give in proportion to what is received. Invest where investment is shown. Respond to consistency with warmth and to inconsistency with distance. Calm distance are not dramatic silence, not emotional outbursts, simply a reallocation of energy. When someone senses that their reduced effort results in reduced access, you are. They recalibrate. When reduced effort still results in full access, they relax further. Scarcity also protects your dignity. You are. When you overextend to keep someone engaged, you begin negotiating your standards. You tolerate delays. You excuse inconsistency. You rationalize minimal effort. You are. And each compromise chips away at self-respect. But when you maintain structure, when your schedule is full, because your life is full, you are. You naturally filter out low investment. Only those willing to align with your pace and standards remain. Gravity is created by depth. Depth comes from discipline. You are. When you are committed to growth, physically, mentally, emotionally, you become grounded, and grounded individuals do not chase. They attract. You are not because they are superior, but because they are stable. Stability is rare, and rarity increases value. Over availability often stems from fear. You are. Fear of losing connection, fear of being replaced, fear of silence. But fear-driven behavior produces the very outcome it tries to avoid. You are. When you flood someone with constant access, you eliminate the space where they feel your absence. And absence is powerful. It clarifies emotions. You are. It reveals priorities. It exposes genuine interest. Without space, there is no reflection. Without reflection, there is no realization. You are. Scarcity creates tension because it allows longing to develop. It allows curiosity to grow. It forces someone to step forward rather than lean back. You are. But this only works if your scarcity is authentic. If you are pretending to be busy while internally obsessing, the energy feels inconsistent. You are. True scarcity comes from genuine engagement with your own life, from goals that demand attention, from routines that require discipline. You are. From friendships that provide fulfillment. When you operate from abundance internally, you no longer cling externally. You are. You understand that your value does not decrease because someone pulls away. You understand that your time is finite and therefore precious. You are. And when you treat it as precious, others begin to as well. If you want gravity, become substantial. Build habits that strengthen you. You are. Maintain boundaries that protect you. Speak less, observe more. Do not rush to fill silence. Let effort reveal itself. Let actions demonstrate priority. You are. The one who is not afraid of space controls the dynamic. Because they are not negotiating from fear, they are acting from self-respect. Scarcity creates gravity. You are. Over-availability kills tension. Remember that, not as a tactic, but as a principle. Structure your life so that access to you is meaningful. You are. Offer your presence where it is reciprocated. Withdraw it where it is taken for granted. And understand this, you are. The right person will not be driven away by your standards. They will be drawn in by them. Because gravity does not repel what is aligned. You are. It pulls it closer with undeniable force. Self-respect and purpose are the trigger that reactivates attraction. Not chasing, not pleading, not explaining. You are. The moment you understand that, everything changes. Attraction does not respond to desperation. It does not revive because you sent a longer message. You are. It does not reignite because you explained yourself more clearly. It returns when strength returns, when strength begins internally. You are. When you anchor yourself in self-respect and move with purpose, you shift the dynamic without saying a word. Chasing signals fear. Pleading signals imbalance. You are. Over-explaining signals insecurity. None of those emotions inspire desire. They may produce temporary reassurance, but they erode long-term admiration. You are. Attraction thrives in the presence of stability. It grows when someone senses that you are grounded, that your identity does not fracture under uncertainty. You are. That your life continues forward whether they step up or step away. That steadiness creates intrigue. It creates respect. You are. And respect is the foundation of sustained connection. Self-respect is not loud. It does not argue. It does not threaten. It does not issue ultimatums out of panic. You are. Self-respect is quiet discipline. It is the decision to withdraw from inconsistency without drama. It is the refusal to tolerate behavior that diminishes your value. You are. It is the ability to sit in silence without scrambling to fill it. When you embody that, your energy changes. You are no longer negotiating for attention. You are. You are evaluating alignment. Purpose amplifies that energy. When your days are structured around meaningful goals, fitness, career, growth, learning, you are. You become less emotionally dependent on validation. You are busy building. You are occupied with progress. And progress generates confidence. You are. Confidence is not arrogance. It is clarity about who you are and where you are going. When someone senses that clarity, they feel it immediately. You are. Because most people drift. Very few move with intention. Intention is magnetic. If someone pulls away and your immediate reaction is to chase, you hand them control. You are. You communicate that their withdrawal dictates your emotional state. But if someone pulls away and you redirect your focus toward improvement, you retain control. You are. You communicate that your direction remains stable regardless of external behavior. That stability forces a recalibration. Because now, you are. Interaction with you requires effort. It requires alignment. It requires growth. Attraction reactivates when mystery returns. You are. And mystery returns when overexposure ends. When you stop narrating every thought. When you stop explaining every emotion. When you allow space to exist without panic. You are. Space is not the enemy of connection. It is the test of it. If the connection has substance, space strengthens it. If it does not, space reveals its weakness. You are. Either way, you gain clarity. Self-respect also means enforcing standards consistently, not emotionally, not sporadically, consistently. If someone cancels repeatedly, you are. You do not lecture, you reduce access. If effort declines, you mirror the decline calmly, not as punishment, but as proportion. Proportion communicates value. You are. It signals that your investment matches theirs. Nothing more, nothing less. And that balance preserves dignity. Purpose protects you from obsession. You are. When your life is empty, you fixate on one person. When your life is full, you evaluate them within a broader context. A full life creates perspective. You are. Perspective reduces anxiety, and reduced anxiety increases attractiveness because anxiety seeks reassurance. Strength offers presence. You are. Do not misunderstand this principle. You are. The goal is not to win someone back. The goal is to become someone who does not abandon themselves in the process of keeping someone else. When you abandon yourself, you are. Your routines, your standards, your goals, you communicate that the relationship is your only anchor. That pressure suffocates attraction. You are. But when you maintain your identity, you create space for desire to breathe, pleading attempts to convince. Purpose demonstrates, chasing demands attention. You are. Self-respect commands it. Explaining tries to secure understanding. Strength embodies it. When your actions reflect discipline and direction, you are. You no longer need to argue your value. It becomes evident. And here is the paradox. You are. The moment you no longer need the attraction to return is the moment you become most attractive, because need distorts behavior. It leads to over-texting, over-giving. You are. Overthinking. But grounded individuals move differently. They respond instead of react. They observe instead of assume. They invest selectively instead of impulsively. You are. If attraction has faded, do not scramble to revive it with words. Revive yourself with action. Strengthen your body. Refine your habits. Deepen your knowledge. You are. Expand your network. Elevate your standards. Let your growth speak. Let your silence communicate confidence. Let your consistency demonstrate maturity. You are. Self-respect and purpose are the trigger, not tactics, not strategies, a transformation. When you transform internally, the external dynamic adjusts automatically. You are. Some will step forward, others will fall away. Both outcomes serve you because the real power was never in convincing someone to stay. You are. It was in becoming someone who never compromises their dignity to be chosen. Stand firm, move forward, build relentlessly, and understand this. You are. Attraction is not reignited by words. It is reignited by the undeniable presence of someone who knows their worth and refuses to negotiate it.